Well, good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to welcome you to the Energy Transition Dialogue's 2-minute warning feature interview. This week, we're delighted to be joined by Mr. Nuki Utama, Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy. Thank you, Dr. Utama, for joining us and taking the time to be with us today. We, on this particular interview series, delve into the general energy trends globally that are impacting countries and businesses and look at the energy transition agenda and the challenges also that is facing within certain regions and some of the solutions that are being put forward both on the policy front and by the private sector. So thank you for joining us. And I suppose I'd like to start by asking you, around the theme of the elephant in the room, which is still with us 6 months on, which is the COVID pandemic, which many countries and businesses have been grappling with, and we are still in it and not out of the woods yet. It's now September the 1st. So 6 months into this, Dr. Nuki, to ask you, what is your overall, how have you seen the impact of the pandemic on the Southeast Asian countries with regards to their energy policies and energy transition policies in particular, and has that had a positive or a negative impact in terms of the speed of transition and policy going forward?
Yes, first of all, I'd like to thanks for this opportunity to share with you. Indeed, this pandemic having a big impact in the region. I think it's globally also having a quite significant impact. In the energy sectors, especially on the demand sectors, it is showing that a lot of decrease of demand of energy, mostly on the oil and gas as well as the electricity. So it is also reported that in the first 3 to 4 months, some of the country in the region declining of its electricity demands up to 20%, from 10 to 20%. Electricity demand was going down. So in terms of the oil and gas demands, also having a similar figures. Therefore, the governments need to have a quick look on the how to see in the possibilities of designing the energy transition in the future. I believe the design
just to pick up on one thing that you mentioned, that the electricity, obviously, usage along with oil and gas has dropped both in the ASEAN countries and globally, of course, and elsewhere in Asia as well. I mean, the ASEAN, I believe, has set itself, for example, a target of reaching a 25% meeting electricity usage, 25% through renewables. You're not there yet. Has the pandemic slowed that activity towards that target down, do you think? What impact has that had on policy, on cooperation on that?
We do have a 2023 target on 23% RE target. Indeed, it is having an impact on those target. Right now, the percentage is around 14.6%, and even harder to reach 23% on 2023. According to our prediction, our models, because of the pandemics, the impact is quite significantly reduce the potential of reaching or achieving 23% target, more or less around 4% behind the target. It is quite alarming for us that the plan that we have for the last couple of decades is being corrected by this condition, especially on the decreasing of the energy demand, as well as having difficulties to keep up on reaching the RE target that we plan to have previously.
Is that, I mean, has the slowdown, as you said, it's made you fall further behind the target that you are trying to achieve? Is that an expenditure issue, an income issue, or is it a hesitancy to proceed with plans that were already in place because of putting demand aside, but in terms of the resources that the countries would be put forward to planning in terms of structural infrastructure and expenditure on reaching those targets? Is it a hesitancy over expenditure, a lack of finance?
Basically, the biggest impact of the COVID-19 is the economic. Therefore, the member states try to focus on the giving a stimulus on the economics, and energy part of the driving factors to increase the potential of the economic growth. Therefore, they also try to push or to give incentive in the energy sectors, such as in the electricity, as I also previously mentioned that the demand is reducing. So they try to give an incentive on the electricity to boost the consumption of the electricity.
Has that worked? I mean, what have they done? They've reduced tariffs, I assume, or they've reduced the charges or payment plans. Has it worked? Have those incentives worked in the last few months?
Yeah, some of the country, there are plenty of policies going on in the region, because we do have 10 member states. Some countries do give an incentive for some particular residential sectors or some industrial sectors. Yeah, we haven't seen it yet, the benefit of it, because most of those incentive goes to the residential sectors, and only 2 countries goes in the industrial sectors incentive. So I realizing in that perspective, we think that the government should give more incentive on industrial sectors in order to boost the economic growth, rather than only focusing on the residential sectors. So this is the first thing that we are facing now. So based on those, you can see how difficult for the member state to go to give more incentive on the transition sectors, which is one of those is renewable energy sectors. So it is also having a quite big impact on the growth of the RE in the region. But once the economic bounce back, once the pandemic gone and then the economic bounce back, the energy demand also return back to its normal. Then I believe the energy transition also back to the normal trace.
Okay, okay, Dr. Nuki. Just to stay a little bit on the big picture stuff before we delve into more specifics within countries or within private sector, perhaps policies as well, and the government. I mean, part of ASEAN's mission is a sort of to help format a cohesive inter-nation policy on energy and cooperation, and perhaps initiatives on things such as R&D and innovation towards the energy transition. Do you see that happening with ASEAN? Do you see that being accelerated as a result of the pressure, the economic pressure that's come about because of the pandemic? Has that triggered more cooperation, more cohesive, I suppose, incentive to cooperate on certain joint initiatives? Or have you seen the opposite, where nations have gone their sort of separate ways in terms of surviving this particular period?
Yes. Regarding with those impacts, I think that each country tried to survive and try to give a stimulus within their own country first. But the interesting thing is that the intense communication and the coordination amongst the member states, giving others new experience. I mean, learning from other countries how to deal with this pandemic's condition, how to deal with the decreasing of the demand, how to deal with the policy to give a stimulus to the people. So coordination and exchange communication and learning coming from other countries is important. But the joint cooperation, something like that, still not yet there. Because of each country still focusing on their own, their own issues.
I mean, one of the things that the ASEAN has been trying to sort of promote, I suppose, through its policy and through its cooperation, is is sort of an ASEAN power grid. I mean, in the Middle East here, we have the same discussions over ideally forming a power grid for the Gulf countries. It's obviously met certain obstacles. Where are we on that in terms of the cooperation and incentive to actually to cooperate more on that? I mean, it's clearly the plus point is that it will achieve better regional economic growth and faster as part of this energy transition. Where does ASEAN countries and members stand on that?
Yes, I do agree the power grid will give more or better economic growth later on. But this power grid design and plan is already being implemented back years in the early 2000. And over there, still running right now. And now even more tangible activities that we have. We do have already agreement on the Laos, Thailand, Malaysia agreement on the connected of the grid itself, and the designing of the power grid currently is being, I mean, the work on those being fulfilled by our institution, ASEAN Center for Energy, on the works supporting by the United States on the AIMS-3 projects. So to find out the optimization value on how the optimum cost will be there, and how the VRE or variable renewable energy can be injected into the grid in the optimum way. And that's before and after COVID, the work still going on, and now still going on as scheduled. No delay on those particular work.
Okay, Dr. Utama, I'd like to touch on coal. I mean, it's still a major power source in Asia, across Asia, and Southeast Asia as well. Clearly, as a definition of a resource, it is technically a dirty resource in this era of energy transition, and yet Asia does not really seem to be slowing down its coal consumption. In fact, it's increasing. We do have initiatives for clean coal, etc., that technology is now obviously offering. Where are we with that in Asia? And do you see the region succeeding in making an exit from relying on that resource, or what is the solution to that?
Currently, the region still rely on the affordable, reliable, and of course, those is one of the priority, or two of the priority in the region have. And coal and gas, we do have still remaining resource that we can utilize within our own member state or being exported. So that's why coal and gas, especially coal, we still try to utilizing it until it will last. Based on our prediction, of course, it will not last forever. Currently, we are the importer of the region, is the importer oil, but we still have quite sometimes on the coal and gas, approximately around 20 up to 40 years remaining of the resource of both.
I mean, the resources are there and they're remaining, but the argument is that they are not the cleanest type of fuel resource, obviously, and the fact is, you mentioned affordability there. The cost of the alternatives, renewables, solar, biofuels, etc., have obviously come dramatically down in the last few years, and we've seen obviously certain uptake of that within certain Asian countries, but very varying levels of investment in that. What is it going to take for certain economies and countries in Asia to make a fuller commitment towards the renewable space, if you like? I mean, China's doing its own thing, and we know where that's at. But the other economies, the other countries, despite their internal resources that they have, the indigenous resources, the pace of that transition, is there enough incentive to do that?
Yes. Okay. Yes. Before jumping on the RE and energy transition, of course, the coal, as I mentioned, is affordable and reliable. We do have a program, we call it the ASEAN Plan for Action for Energy Cooperation, which is one of the program area is the clean coal technology. So in order to go on the process on the transition itself, we do have tried to utilize more on the higher efficiency and low emission coal power generation, for example. And in regard with the RE, as you know that we do have plan on 23% target in 2025, where one of the abundant resource of RE, which is biomass, will be fully utilized in the region. We plan to have we call it the biofuel, and some of the countries already have a solid plan on those. We do have B10, B20, and one of the biggest country in the region, Indonesia, plan also to have B100 or biodiesel 100, which is 100% fully coming from the bioresource. And then also in the power sectors, in combination with the coal, we plan to have a co-firing with the biomass as well. So upgraded biomass can be part of the coal feedstock. So that's some of the example the region tried to keep up with the increases of RE by utilizing all of those natural resources. Of course, wind and solar also, but it's not, wind, for example, is not that much in comparison with solar and others.
Yeah, I mean, would you say that in general, I mean, for example, the whole argument about putting a price on carbon and putting that on as a disincentive for future use of carbon, and obviously creating more efficiencies on that use, and obviously cleaner energy. We've seen Europe make some progress on pricing carbon, if you like, and making that as a disincentive for people to move away from that. In the US, for example, we've seen no success on that front, and from the federal point of view. In Asia, where are we there with progress towards the thinking on whether a price on carbon is worthwhile? Can it be implemented? Will it be taken up by industry? Where are we on the policy front there? And is there an incentive, and is there a strong push for it amongst the ASEAN governments and countries?
In regard with the carbon pricing, I think we haven't have any tangible policy on those carbon pricing, since we are currently struggling with how we try to take off on becoming one of the big region with a big economic development. So we need a fundamentals foundation, which is energy is one of the fundamental foundation. So whatever it is, the region try to make sure that the energy is first, as I mentioned, affordable, reliable, and of course we try as much as possible to be sustainable enough with the effort that we try to do, whether it is a national effort as well as a regional efforts. So by doing that, we try to latch on first keep up in terms of the economic and energy, and then later on we go step by step on improving our policy on perhaps carbon taxing or carbon pricing as well. But keep in mind that we also having quite good figures in terms of the energy intensity. We do have a target 20% in 2020, and this year we already achieved more than 24% or almost 25% energy intensity target. So in terms of efficiency, yes, we do have quite good.
I mean,
yes.
Beyond the environmental benefits of accelerating a transition, if you like, amongst countries, is that you mentioned the economic challenges that the ASEAN countries are having, in particular in the last few months. And what about the employment market within the industry and within the energy sector? With the world moving towards an energy transition and with costs coming down and producing that type of energy, we're also seeing a lot of jobs created within that sector. And yet, if the focus, you're saying, of the ASEAN countries, which is still in a growth period, is to fuel themselves in whichever way they can to continue that economic growth, are they missing an opportunity, would you say, in terms of the new job creation that can be created if they were to accelerate the move on the transition front?
Yes, I do agree. If we move on the transition direction, for example, the RE will create local jobs more comparing with the fossil fuel. Indeed, it is agreeable on that. Of course, we notice and we realize on those potential. But currently, if we're talking about current condition, we are focusing on how to bring the economic back by giving a big incentive on how the energy can be returned back on its normal phase. That's quite important things to do. But later on, if we already go back on the or bounce back on the right track, I mean after COVID-19, then the RE will be go back again on the business on the energy sectors. I think that will be something like that.
Dr. Nuki, I mean, I'd like to ask you again, take it more to the macro geopolitical front on the US sort of China relations and trade, etc., and how that's impacted global economy this year, putting COVID aside. What's your viewpoint in terms of the interests of the ASEAN countries if we were to see a change of administration in the US come November? And we saw a Biden presidency, a Democratic president come into the White House. Presumably, as everyone is saying, he would sign the US back onto the Paris Climate Agreement. But in terms of any policies of the US towards Asia, and particularly China, and how that might be impacting the thinking within the energy policy of ASEAN countries, well, is that in your thinking and in the vision, or sort of, I suppose, of ASEAN at the moment, or factoring as an influence on policy?
The region itself is very neutral in these geopolitical issues. We do have a lot of help coming from the States as well as from Europe, and of course coming from China and Russia. Of course, all of those countries and region hand to hand with us to work on the how to secure and make affordable and reliable energy in the region. Last week, I think, just finished our meeting, the senior officials meeting of energy. We also invite Russia, China, Korea, Japan, United States, even New Zealand to discuss the energy issues, and also giving us suggestion and also collaboration activities on the energy sector. So we are welcome with any countries, and once again neutral on the geopolitical issues.
Do you feel that, I mean, there's been a lot of talk that the crisis, the COVID crisis and global economic pandemic has refocused attention of governments on the climate challenge, and that actually it has reinvigorated activity on climate change policies and accelerated that, and even has proven that should expenditure be needed to spend on the economies, it can come, and therefore that should be an accelerator to the energy transition and to climate change policies being pursued by certain countries. Would you agree with that?
The most important thing in our region is, we're realizing that some of the fossil fuel-based energy sources somehow giving a bad impact on the environment. And that's one of the things that we are really considering it. On the environmental impact or damage coming from the fossil fuel processes, and also of course emission. If you're looking at the cities in Southeast Asia currently caused by the COVID-19, it's a clear blue sky over there. So it means that the emission coming from the exhaust pipe, if you looking at in that perspective, which is sometimes of course giving a bad emission and giving a bad look in the city, a bad air in the city. And after COVID-19, people are realizing that putting a bad fuel in the car will also result in a bad air in the city. So hopefully after the COVID-19, this is one of the benefits. In fact, we don't see COVID-19 as only having a bad impact, but there is a benefit of it, that we can educate the people that if you give a good source in your tile path, then the city will be cleaner.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the city and urban planning, obviously, and a lot of very condensed cities, if you like, in the ASEAN nations. Some of them are very heavily populated. You mentioned vehicles, etc. I mean, obviously, battery power is battery cars, electric vehicles are out there. There's perhaps not quite commercially viable for your average user, but we're getting there. Hydrogen has been another source that's been touted and vector that's been touted in the last few months in particular. Obviously, it's nothing new, but it has caught a lot of attention and investment as another clean source for mobility, whether it's for cars or for heavier transport. Are the ASEAN nations looking at that from a policy front at all as something to invest into in terms of part of their urban planning?
Yes, in terms of the end users technology, we do really considering all of the options, including, as you mentioned, the hydrogen. We also considering the electricity vehicles, and of course, BICE or biofuel-based internal combustion engine, or for the transportation sectors. So we try to looking at the whole perspective and try to make sure that our decision is not in the wrong decision where we go or we only focusing in one selection. So we have to make sure that again it is secure enough. For example, if you put all with electricity vehicles, for example, in Indonesia itself, you will have increases 20 gigawatt electricity capacity increases. For example, if you have another 100 million motorcycle, for example. So those kind of plans should be designed clearly and have to involving all of the stakeholders on energy sectors as well as experts on energy sector to redesigning the energy scenario and planning for the member states. So how we can go after the COVID-19. As I mentioned, the economic is impacted, the energy demand also impacted. The target is perhaps will be missed. Then we need to redesign again our scenario and planning. And over there, we can put some of those, for example, the technology that perhaps beneficial in the future, more cleaner and also, of course, more affordable and reliable for the region.
And in terms of any R&D on innovation that is being done by the countries, obviously you have certain strong R&D centers around the world in academia, and those are known. What kind of budgeting is being put forward by the governments, if you like, of the ASEAN countries going forward towards more indigenous R&D, into innovation, into finding and sourcing the technologies that are going to help these countries reduce their costs, make this transition? Or are you still primarily relying on importing knowledge and technology? I mean, your neighbors, Japan, South Korea, China, are behemoths in technology creation. What is the policy that going forward? Are you an importer of technology, or is there an incentive to start having some kind of indigenous development of that?
Yeah, indigenous development or R&D is very important, and we do have plenty of activities on the R&D sectors in the region. And realizing it that we are like behind on top of the technology advancement on the power sector, for example, in the transportation sector, for example. So realizing those, we are now, or even back a few decades ago, we already started on involving on the R&D in each member state to go ahead on the direction of energy transition. For example, the biofuel, our R&D is quite strong in terms of the biofuel sector. So we don't only rely on imported technology in that sense. But some other sectors, for example, power sectors, if other country having more efficient power generation, for example, we also open on those accepting the technology, and together we learn how to improve our current power sectors to be more efficient and reliable.
And just one last question on that, in terms of partnerships between the R&D and sort of academia world that is pursuing that and the private sector. We see in other parts of the world a lot of cooperation between the energy sector and private business there with academia, and trying to pool their knowledge and resources both towards R&D and towards finding solutions. Do you see that cooperation happening between the private and public sector to a great extent within your member states?
Yes, every year we do have ASEAN Energy Business Forum, combining the policy sectors as well as the business sectors and including industrial sectors. This year, we plan to have a triple helix, which is including these policymakers, business and industrial sectors, and also academy and research institution. So looking at on those activities, we really try to combine all of the stakeholders together to solve the energy issue, energy crisis, energy security, which is more reliable and sustainable as well as affordable. And then we know that policymakers themselves cannot solve the energy crisis issue, for example, or energy security issues, for example. So we have to really working together on those.
And do you think any country in Asia can hope to compete with China on cost? How much of a challenge is that? And it's nothing new, but again, China keeps driving down its costs more and more every day because of its size, because of its power, I suppose. So is that playing a part in incentivizing other nations to speed up that innovation, or is it putting them off, perhaps?
Yes, then that can be also one of the factors that we need to speed up our R&D development on, also keeping up the lag behind on top of the technology. But we are on the direction, and we are on the right direction on going on this path. So, and we have to keep in mind that if we go into the energy transition, especially the RE, is more on the locally, the resources locally available, and the technology is better on the local perspective rather than just imported for somewhere else, which is maybe having a different culture, different climates, also different kind of resource. For example, the biomass itself maybe have a different characteristic. So it is important for us to learn and to improve it ourselves to be a more local technology wise rather than just importing something from abroad.
And that also certainly makes sense even on the physical goods and product side. The one big theme that's come out of the pandemic is the whole question of supply chain across the board, across industries, and how nations are having to start to focus on being independently self-sufficient in that sense. And that, of course, extends to technology on the larger scale. Dr. Nuki Utama, Executive Director of the ASEAN Center for Energy, I'd like to thank you for joining us today for our 2-minute warning feature interview. Thank you for your time and your insight, and we hope to see you again very soon.
Thank you. Thank you.